P4000, I think I've spoken to a few of you in the room. Some of you are already running this technology, some of you aren't. So, I mean, what is it? It's, first of all, it's a scale-out SAN. I'll talk about that. So it's a new way of building up your SAN environment. It's very efficient in terms of the way it does thin provisioning and other technologies along that way. But a key point and a key value proposition of Left Hand is the way it does disaster recovery, and that's why we're here today. And it's not just the way it does it; it's also how you can achieve it at a very low cost point, and also the way you achieve true active-active environments in VMware. And very few of our competitors can actually achieve true, simple, cost-effective active-active clustering of their storage. So if we start and we look at the clustering aspect first, think about traditional storage. You have typically two controllers and a bunch of disks underneath it. As you grow your disks, the controllers don't increase in capacity. They're fixed CPU and memory. If you lose one of those controllers, all of a sudden you've lost half of your performance. You're in write-through mode, so you're really crippled until that controller is fixed. But there are general limitations in that architecture, which, as I stated in my strategy piece, if you don't address those traditional architectures are going to break very quickly. So what we do with the P4000, and I use Left Hand and P4000 interchangeably, excuse me if I do that. But in effect, if you need more storage, you add a second node of Left Hand. It's all done online and it's seamless, and your LUNs automatically balance across both nodes. If you then add more servers because you need virtual machines, all you do is just keep on adding nodes, and you're scaling out linearly in performance, because every time you add a node, you're not only adding all the spindles there, you're adding CPUs, you're adding memory. It's a multi-controller configuration. So then you might reach a point where you say, well, if you, for example, have a performance tier, you need a high performance tier. There's specific requirements in your environment. What you can then do is add, maybe 15K spindles instead of 10. Or you can add an SSD tier, which I'll talk about. But that becomes a part of your P4000 cluster, and you can dynamically migrate your LUNs between different tiers without an outage to your environment. Just so it's migrating. You want to do a proof of concept to start with. You can do that using VSA technology. The virtual SAN appliance is a piece of software that goes onto a normal rack mount server, and it turns internal disks into shared storage. And that technology is a very big focus at HP, because ultimately Left Hand, and like I said before, a lot of these technologies, a lot of the storage products are largely software. The underlying hardware is controllers, spindles. It's pretty generic stuff. It's the software that differentiates it. So the VSA is the Left Hand software, and it allows you to create a very small SAN as a test bed. If you then decide that works, you can drop in Left Hand nodes, the pre-packaged Left Hand solution. Online, migrate to your bigger solution. You can move what was your proof of concept onto a second site, for example, for test dev or DR, and all of a sudden you have a cluster across site. If you then find that you outgrow that, because what we're finding obviously is data is growing exponentially, you can then drop in the larger Left Hand again, and automatically migrate your LUNs. All of a sudden you have a cluster with different tiers of storage, but you've introduced that whole environment without an outage, and you have a central point of management to manage it all. So HA is particularly important. We're talking about DR today, but HA within a single box. What enables HA on Left Hand is the RAID configurations, and it's network RAID. So what you can do, you can have network RAID 5 or network RAID 10, which actually gives you redundancy across your nodes. So depending on your workload, you'll set up either network RAID 10 or network RAID 5, depending on your performance profile. If you're in network RAID 5, so you will then drop the cluster. But if you're in network RAID 10, you're still up and running. This is a double failure in an environment, and there's been no impact to your environment at all. And in this configuration, you actually lose a third node, and you're still up and running. So it's very important, not just from a disaster recovery perspective, but from a HA perspective within a single site. If we then start talking about, well, how do I protect from site failure? How do I implement DR? How do I do it cost effectively? Then this is where P4000 really starts to shine. Because what you can do is set up a second site, put your servers there, and set up your VMware cluster across both sites. That's fairly simple. But what you can then do is physically separate your nodes in the same cluster and have them across the site. So as long as your pipe is big enough between the two, you just created an active-active cluster, a DR configuration with no additional hardware, no additional software licenses. And it's the software licenses which really can hurt you in terms of cost in getting that whole environment set up. Here, you're literally just physically separating the nodes. And that's what we're trying to show that in the rack at the back when Will does his presentation, that we've separated those two to show that, but in effect, that would be on different sites. This animation here showing that if you lose location 1, your VMs will automatically fail off the other side. But from a storage perspective, nothing has changed. It's active-active. It's not failing over. It's just there. And that's the network RAID technology which enables that. And keep in mind, the left-hand is software. There are teams of engineers working on optimizing the way the network RAID is calculated, the way it works, so that this remains up at all times and performs well. If that's not what you wanted to do and you want to do standard replication, that's available as well. And it's just not as cool as that, the active-active. But some customers say, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to replicate across. That functionality is still there. You can do asynchronous replication. You can use VMware SRM, for example, to manage the direction of the way you write data. But in effect, you can have a remote volume that you take snapshots with. You lose a site, and SRM would jump in and automatically use your remote volume as a primary and manage that control. So in terms of the product range and where they sit, so as I said, the P4000 virtual server appliance is software, very useful in robo sites, remote sites where you might not want to put dedicated storage. You use your existing investment, lay the software on top, and you have a shared environment. There's the P4300 and the P4500. They're rack-based nodes. So that's what we have in the back of the room today. And you can have performance or capacity tiers in that model. If you need a larger environment that scales further, that's more dense, then there's the 4800, which uses blade technology and it uses MDS drawers, which are very dense for storage. And really, this is, if you've heard about HP's converged infrastructure strategy, about bringing server storage and networking all together, that's converged infrastructure in a box. So an example of a I three-tier scenario, and this is something you may not have heard of. You can now get SSD technology as a P4000 left-hand node. So you can have an SSD tier, a 15K spindle SAS performance tier, and then a midline SAS, which is really SATA drives with the SAS mechanism, or as a capacity or an archive tier. And that, it's all managed from one centralized console, which is your P4000 console, and you can use the technology inherent in that to move LUNs between those different tiers as required. So P4000, this is really, the key points of P4000, what differentiates it is the way the clustering works, the way you scale out, the way you achieve HA through network RAID, and the way that leads onto multi-site availability. So nobody in the industry can do active-active clusters as cleanly as this, without the complexity, without the cost. There is always a trade-off somewhere with the other technologies out there. So this is really a point of differentiation for P4000 storage. The integration with VMware, Citrix and Windows is there, it's very strong. In fact, VMware reps used to have left-hand software on their laptops when they were first starting to sell VMware, going out to customers and showing them VMware on their laptop. So there are very close ties between VMware and especially